We're back again on this, and you can see he's still missing one eye. And now he's set up a bit. So he's a little bit stiffer. I took all the blue towels already, and yes, I flip them upside down. I'm checking if the nostrils are full of anything, making sure they're pretty clear. I'm going to pinch this a little bit, and just to see if the consistency, if whether or not I can dart or not. So for darting, what I'm going to do is, let's say you decide this neck is too big. So I'm going to take my fettling knife. And usually I do this on the back. Sometimes I do it here if I want to make more of a throat look. But usually I trim or thin this part down on the back. So I'm going to take this at an angle like this, cut down. I'm going to keep that same angle, but then push back. And that is a dart, or a little triangle dart. So by removing the clay, I'm going to make his neck a little bit thinner. So he's not as thick-necked of a figure or a sculpture. So there's the slip. We're going to go down, and then we're going to push, and push that seam. It's almost like pushing two sides together. Like if you're working with canvas and trying to sew things together, you push it together, and then you can start working on that joint, and that brings it in a little bit more. Now you can dart a lot, but be careful. If you dart too much, this gets really small, and then the head becomes tipsy. And then you might need to be put onto another sculpture, or a vessel, or another object, or on the wood post. You also tap these a little bit, and push that out a little bit, just working on the neck a little bit. A little more detail there. Sometimes I texture these so they look different than the head. I'm just going to leave this one alone. Now you can see that his neck's gotten a little bit smaller, and you can still push in and cup and shape it. And then you can dart again if you decide you need to take more off. But like I said, be careful that it doesn't get so small, unless you end up eventually having the head upside down, which some people do, or sleeping, if you have a head that's on its side. Okay. So now we're going to cap off the top. I'm going to take a piece of clay. I'm going to push him out of my way. And I'm just going to pound this clay. And technically what I'm making is the skull cap. So I'm going to thin it down. If you leave it a little bit thicker, it's okay, because you can actually take advantage of it being a little bit thicker to make hair details coming out of the clay rather than adding to the clay. Put that on there. He's going to look like he has a flat head right now. Later on, once I have it attached, I'll go back inside with another tool, or my hand if I can, and push it out so it's rounded. The other thing is, if I add hair or sculpt hair on it, it's going to hide that flatness. Okay. So what I'm going to do is drape it down a little bit, so it almost becomes like a little fabric hat. I'm going to mark approximately where I need to cut. I'm also going to mark where the front of this is to that nose. So I'm just going to make a little line there. And you can leave it on there, or you can take it off. I'm going to go ahead and take it off. So you'll notice I might cut a little bit to the outside of that. Now these pieces of clay are just like normal. I'll smash it back together to use later. Okay. So I'm looking where the line is. Now I'm marking the side of it. Now I'm going to score this. The main problem people run into capping pieces off like this is that they don't slip and score well enough and push really hard as they work it, and sometimes the skull cap part pops off. The other thing I'm going to do, remember how this was flat? I'm actually going to push this out a little bit now to round it a little bit more on the inside. Then I'm cupping it in my hand. I'm going to add my slip. Now remember, this clay is really wet. This clay was from a little bit drier, so I'm actually going to slip it, score up tooth up the clay again, put score it up and score down a little bit because there's going to be a little bit of an overlap. You'll notice I'm really generous with the slip right now because I need plenty of gluing agent. Now, there's that line again. I'm going to try lining it up again. And you can see his head is now a little bit more round. And now we're going to work the top piece into the bottom piece until the joint is all one, as much as possible. Now the fun part is if parts of the head start looking a little bit lumpy, you can tap it a little bit to fix them. The other thing about the lumping is if you let this stiffen up a bit, you can add hair to the outside and it'll hide lumps. Just like I always joke, that's why people get certain types of haircuts, I think, is to hide lumps on heads. The other thing about if you get really interested in doing the hair, then you might not need to sculpt ears. You can hide them. Okay, so you can see that seam is still there. So I'm just pushing it and working it. Be careful not to push in here, because of course you'll sink in the head, though you could always fix it from the inside. Now his head's capped. And sometimes I use my paddle carefully to help too. And just watch. And what I'm looking at as I'm paddling, I'm looking over on the farther edge as I go around, rather than where the paddle's hitting, so I can get an idea of what is happening. Okay. Now let's go ahead and I'm just going to do a quick ear. There's lots of demos online. He's missing an eye here, so we might as well give him an ear on the side that's more finished. That way one side looks like it's more raw and the other side's more artistic or abstracted. So I'm going to score. And remember, there's going to be a handout also that's online that I'm using these lines to mark the center of that ear. Same with the lines that are still there. Take a piece of clay, make it look like a little kidney shape. I'm going to start pushing. And you'll notice that I'm pushing and making the edge of the ear thicker. So you can see here, it's become this hollow form like a kidney shape. And from the back, I'm going to push out a little bit. Start making a little bit more detail. Ears, when you start looking at them closely if you go online and do searches for ears, or you look at ears as people as they walk around, you'll notice that there's parts that go in and out and start shaping. The other thing is, you can see, you can put the ear on there and go, whoa, that's way too big, right? Or that's too small. Remember, hair can hide things too. Now, if it sticks out a lot and you don't like it sticking out a lot, you go back to the back angle, same thing the way I cut stuff. You can actually cut the ear down. And I usually cut my ears a bit, because then it makes them a little bit more flatter, so they don't stick out as much. Now, like I said, hair, other things can hide that. Baseball hats, but we're going to go with that for now. I'm just doing a real quick gestural ear. I'm not going to go into heavy details about it, other than I might make a little bit of an air escape hole, which will be the ear canal hole. That'll help with the piece maybe. Sometimes I do that. So I slipped and scored. And this ear spatially is a little bigger, so I need to score a little bit wider. And we push it on. When I push it on, I can also start working the ear back a little bit. That way it doesn't stick out too much. Though I've had students over the years, they like the ears that stick out. And actually, in my last school, students like ears that stuck out because then they could drill holes in it and then they could put earrings in it. Make the ear canal hole. Now he can hear what we're saying. Just like that. Now, I'm still missing, this one is I don't have a lobe yet. You know, you can add your lobe by slipping and scoring it on, or like I'm attaching it directly to this clay that's really wet anyways. And then, like anything, as you do this, you can decide to always remove. You can always cut it off and do it again. So it just takes practice and just getting the structure right. Main thing I'm looking at is making sure center eye, center of ear. So I'm just looking, and I use my needle tool or a stick like this a lot to check. And I always tell students, I check stuff like that, but I'm not sure how often a viewer really checks things like that. It's just the way I was trained. Okay. See that cheekbone goes that way. Okay. Now, right now, there's a couple different ways to deal with hair. This is still pretty soft, but you can start with coils. Then if you pinch them and twist them a little bit, and then you score the whole thing, you can give them twisty hair. And if you twist them, you'll start getting different textures. And then you can start creating hair in the different ways, going all the way down. That's one way that takes a long time. Myself personally, on a lot of sculptures, because remember how I left this clay a little bit thicker? So I'm actually going to clean my fork, and I'm actually going to literally fork his hair. I'll give him hair by forking, using the texture of the fork. And you can move it in different ways to start making wavy patterns if you want. And later on, I clean up any little pieces that are sticking out. Or sometimes I put iron oxide and glaze them. Make them permanent. It's just part of this. And you can see how I'm twisting the fork a little bit, so I'm combing him up a little bit, giving his hair a little bit more detail, just naturally. And this is all just with a fork. You know, there's multiple ways to sculpt hair. This is just another fast way to do stuff. And of course, you can do both. You could sculpt and texture this now as slipped and scored. Then you can decide, maybe I want more hair in the middle. You can attach it here and then do it again and build it up a little bit. So, and then from there, actually, we're going to take the fork again. I'm going to give him a little bit of an eyebrow. Even though I didn't finish this eye, we'll go ahead and give him a little bit of an eyebrow there too. For eyelashes, I actually will go in with a needle tool and make little holes, and then I actually will put little pieces of metal wire if I really want to get to that detail. Now, let's say the middle collapses on you in some way. Okay, I usually grab him, and then of course I don't want to knock his ear off, and then I pick him up. And then I take anything that's round. At home I have a really big round stick. And then I tap. And then I can look. And you can see the tool pushing his head back out. So you can... Now normally, in a non-video demo setting, I would wait for him to be a little bit stiffer. Gotta be afraid I'd pop a hole through his head. But that might be a concept you're looking for too. This to me right now is normally finalized. I might sculpt that eye in, but a lot of times with demo pieces like this, I'll actually just hollow out an eye. And again, I'll probably fire him in the next week, and he's going to be one of my firing demos for Raku. So I'll open up this and just make an open hole. So then you can see this part's more abstracted or simplified down. This part's getting more realistic. So it's that contrast for the viewer. And that's something as you're building heads or head studies. I know I mentioned fantasy and abstract. This becomes your own study of the different pieces that Mr. Luna is showing you. And then you can decide how far you're going to take it and how far you're not going to take it. A real fun thing I like to do on my little heads like this is I'll carve my name in it like a neck tattoo. And then when I fire him, I'll highlight that and you'll see my signatures on his neck. So that is the end of this video.